Step 1 was to mill up my 5/4 black walnut. In my shop I do not have a jointer, so I use my planer and a planer sled and some shims and ran it through my planer several times to create one flat reference side for each board. I made this particular planer sled for this project based on the length of the boards that I was milling up. In your project, you can base it on however long you'd like. Once each board had one flat side to reference off of, I then went ahead and flipped over the boards and sent them back through my planer to create a top and bottom surface that was completely flat. Similar to my planer sled, I then went ahead and took my tapering jig to create one 90-degree flat reference side on one edge of each board. Once this was achieved, now I had three sides that were reference flat and a 90-degree angle. From there, using the new flat side to reference, I ran that side along the edge of my table saw fence, and that gave me four sides that were 90 degrees and ready for glue up. At the time of this build, I'd had no biscuit joiner or domino joiner, so I decided to use what I had, which was a dowel jig, and just created some simple dowel holes and set it up so that I could use this for proper alignment during the glue up. This holds no structural integrity. It's more or less just to keep the boards straight and aligned properly during the glue up. It's also important to note that make sure none of these holes are in the way of your cut line when you cut out the table. For my dowels, I went ahead and bought some 3/8 inch dowels just from a big box store and cut them down on my crosscut sled. As my tabletop was gluing up, I then took some 8/4 inch walnut and started cutting it down to rough length on my miter saw. Just like I did earlier, I used my tapering jig to create a 90-degree edge to reference off of my table saw fence. With the 90-degree edge referencing off of my table saw fence, I set the width of cut to 3 inches. This would allow me to get two boards to glue up for my 3x3 legs. Once my legs were finally out of clamps and done gluing up, I then put them back on my tapering jig in order to square up one edge before sending the legs back through the planer one last time. This process took 2 cuts per side, but ultimately gave me the square edge that I was looking for. Once they were finished going through the planer for the last time, they're finally 90 degrees square and ready to be cut to final length. Because the depth of cut exceeded that of my table saw blade, I went ahead and cut the final length on my miter saw. After the legs were cut and ready, using the leftover boards that I had milled for the tabletop, I went ahead and cut the pieces for the box apron for the base of the table. Once the aprons were cut to their final length, I then cut a dado using my table saw along each piece to accommodate for the rock hardware tabletop fasteners that I would be using to fasten the top of the table to the base. Once all my components were milled and cut to size and my tabletop was out of clamps, it was time to cut out the top using my own circle jig I made out of half-inch plywood. Finding the center point on the underside of the tabletop, I mounted my circle jig using a simple wood screw. Then, with my router and a 1/4-inch down-cut spiral bit, I made 2 passes around, only cutting to about 1/2 inch of depth of the material. From there, following the edge of the cut I had just made, I used my jigsaw to rough cut out the rest. Once everything was rough cut, I flipped over the piece, and using my initial router cut as a reference, I did my final pass using my flush trim spiral bit. Using my palm router, I went ahead and used a 1/4-inch round over bit just to round over the edges for smooth touch. Once everything was assembled and had its final sanding, I finished the piece off with Odie's oil. I chose Odie's because it is super easy to use, as it is a single application finish. I hope you enjoyed watching this build. It was a lot of fun for me, as this was my first true piece of furniture. I hope this also makes you understand that you can build furniture like this with a limited shop using only simple tools. I will be sure to link all of the tools and materials that I used for this build in the description below, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see any more of my future projects. Thanks very much, and take care.